quiet of the morning, in the stillness of the night, we find hope, we find comfort in His love so.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters in Christ, of this Christ-centered community. Emmanuel, God is with us. This is the second episode in our, I would say, conversation on the book of Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 to 17. There's a slight bit of an issue here. I was meant to do my usual AI human interaction, but unfortunately I've been having some technical issues with my computer and then the environment, so I haven't managed to do that. So this episode will be a bit different. It will be an interaction with two AI in a deep dive. I can talk to you about that in the future, how it is done. And then you'll hear me interjecting live with my questioning. This possibly could be a format as well. Maybe I could alternate it, so I may use a combination. So you will not hear me having that interaction with the AI in terms of one-to-one as my co-host. But what you'll find in this session is the deep dive looking at Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 to 17, but then I will interject with several questions. This version was meant to be a trial, but I just feel like I should just upload this and let us be blessed by it, okay? I hope you'll find it interesting and be blessed, and we can learn together. All right, thank you very much.
Matthew 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham.
Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers, at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar the father of Mathan, and Mathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations.
Today we're going straight into what might look like pretty dry territory for some people. Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 17, the genealogy of Jesus.
Right. That list of names.
Exactly. But, stick with us here because honestly, hidden in this list is this, incredible story about God's faithfulness.
Absolutely. It's more than just a family tree.
So our mission today is really to unpack this, understand what this list tells us about Jesus, and maybe, just maybe, shed some light on your own story too.
Yeah, it's easy to just skip over genealogies, isn't it? But back then, they were hugely important. They established who you were, where you came from, and crucially, if promises were being fulfilled.
Okay, so let's jump right into verse 1, Matthew 1.1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Bam. Right away, two massive titles.
Huge. Son of...
Oh, wait, someone wants to join. Hey, go for it.
I have a question for you. What do you think Matthew, why do you think Matthew includes these specific women in Jesus' genealogy?
That's a fantastic question. What's fascinating here is exactly why these particular women are included.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you're right, it's not your typical who's who list.
Ancient genealogies were usually very male-focused. So the fact that Matthew includes Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and the wife of Uriah really stands out.
Right, equally important. That points to kingship, doesn't it?
Directly. It connects Jesus to God's promise to King David that one of his descendants would rule on an eternal throne. It's about the promised king, the Messiah. And your question about the women fits right into this.
So just in this one opening verse, Matthew's basically laying it all out. He's saying, look, this Jesus isn't random. He's the climax of these ancient, powerful promises God made.
He's the long-awaited one. It sets the whole stage. And as we go through the genealogy, these women you asked about really highlight a key part of that story.
Okay, so now we get into the names themselves, starting verse 2. And this is where some really interesting details start popping up. Yep, go on.
Yes, sorry about that. I meant to have asked you a question at the beginning on verse 1. First, I have three questions.
No problem at all. Yeah.
I have three questions. One, why does Matthew highlight David and Abram first? What's the theological significance? Number two, how does this verse help us understand Jesus' role as both king and covenant fulfiller? And three, what would this opening line have meant to a Jewish reader in the first century?
Oh, no worries at all. Thanks for jumping back in. Those are excellent questions about verse 1. Let's definitely dig into that.
Absolutely. It's so helpful to focus right there at the beginning. You're asking about what Matthew is highlighting by mentioning David and Abraham first and its theological significance.
Right, and that ties right into your second question about Jesus' role as both king and covenant fulfiller. It's all interconnected.
And your third point about what this would have meant to a first century Jewish reader is crucial for understanding Matthew's purpose.
Okay, so let's unpack this. By starting with Abraham, Matthew is immediately tapping into that foundational understanding of God's promise. Remember, the promise was that through Abraham's descendants, all nations would be blessed.
Exactly. It sets Jesus up right away as the culmination of that long-awaited global blessing. The theological significance is immense. It establishes Jesus' universal reach from the very start.
And then, by mentioning David, Matthew is hitting on that core expectation of the Messiah as the rightful king of Israel who would sit on an eternal throne.
So the order isn't accidental. It's highlighting both the broad scope of God's plan through Abraham and the specific royal lineage through David. Jesus isn't just one or the other. He embodies both.
And for a first century Jewish reader, these titles would have been loaded with meaning. They would have instantly recognized the weight of these connections.
Absolutely. They were steeped in the Old Testament prophecies and expectations of a Messiah who would fulfill these very roles. So this opening line is a powerful statement of Jesus' identity right from the get-go.
It's like Matthew saying, this is the one you've been waiting for, the one promised to your ancestors. It would have created immediate recognition and likely a lot of anticipation.
And as we move through the genealogy, you'll see how these two threads, the covenant with Abraham and the kingship of David, continue to be important. Even those women we were talking about earlier play a part in this unfolding story.
Exactly. Their inclusion, as we were saying, hints at how God works in surprising and sometimes messy ways to fulfill these very promises made to Abraham and David.
So thank you for bringing us back to verse 1. It provides such a crucial lens for understanding everything that follows. Now, moving on to verses 2 through 6a, we see the lineage from Abraham leading down to David.
And as we look at these names, it's important to remember that this isn't a list of perfect people. We see real human stories with all their complexities. Take Abraham, for instance.
Or Isaac, and then Jacob, and then we get to Judah. Each name carries its own history, its own set of circumstances.
And within those circumstances, we see God's faithfulness continuing generation after generation, leading us closer to the promised Messiah.
That's the incredible thing about this genealogy. It's a testament to God's relentless pursuit of his promises, even through imperfect people.
Okay, so we go Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, Jacob to Judah, and then it continues down to Jesse, who is the father of David.
Which brings us right back to that key figure we just discussed, David the king, the one to whom God promised an eternal dynasty.
And from David, as we'll see in the next section, the genealogy continues through the line of kings, leading us further down towards the time of Jesus.
So even in this section with all the names, we can already see those important threads of covenant and kingship that Matthew highlighted right at the beginning.
Absolutely. It's all part of that bigger story of God's faithfulness across generations. And we still have more to unpack as we continue through this list.
Indeed. We'll see how even through periods of disobedience and exile, God's plan continues to unfold, always pointing towards the arrival of Jesus.
So stick with us as we keep tracing this incredible lineage, and we'll see how God's grace shines through every generation, right up to Jesus.
That's right. This genealogy isn't just a history lesson. It's a story of hope and the unwavering love of God. Thanks for joining us today as we explore this rich passage.
And thank you for your insightful questions. They really help us all dig deeper. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our journey through Matthew.
Yes, I have a few more questions. Let's go back to the naming of Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Question number one: what does this inclusion teach us about grace and God's view of the outsider? How can these women's stories speak to people who feel unworthy or disqualified today?
These are such important questions. Let's definitely dive deeper into why Matthew might have included these specific women.
What's fascinating here, as you pointed out, is what it tells us about God's grace and his view of those who might be considered outsiders.
Absolutely. Think about it. Tamar's story is complicated, to say the least. Rahab was a Canaanite, a prostitute. Ruth was a Moabite, not even an Israelite originally. And Bathsheba, well, her story is intertwined with David's sin.
Exactly. These aren't the typical heroes of faith you might expect to see highlighted in a lineage. Their inclusion really shouts about God's grace extending to unexpected people.
It shows us that God's family isn't some exclusive club for the perfect. He actively includes people with messy pasts and from different backgrounds.
And that's incredibly good news for anyone who feels unworthy or disqualified today. These women's stories are proof that your past doesn't disqualify you from being part of God's story.
Right. God sees potential and worth even when the world might not. These women, despite their circumstances, played vital roles in the lineage leading to Jesus.
Their stories are powerful examples of how God's grace can redeem and repurpose even those unlikely lives. They were outsiders in various ways, yet God brought them into the very heart of his plan.
So if you're listening and you feel like your story is too messy or you've made too many mistakes, remember Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. They are right there in the family line of Jesus.
Their inclusion is a testament to God's expansive love and his radical grace. He doesn't just look past our flaws. He works through them to accomplish his purposes.
It really shifts our perspective on who God chooses and how he works. It's not about perfection. It's about his relentless love and faithfulness.
Precisely. And as we continue through this genealogy, we'll see how this theme of God working through the unexpected continues to unfold.
Okay, so after David, verse 6b kicks off the next section, moving from David down to the exile in Babylon.
We see Solomon, Rehoboam.
Oh, yeah,
Yes, sorry, before you move on to the exile, let's look at these women again. Can you tell us a little bit about Tamar, Bathsheba, Rahab, and Ruth? Just something briefly, please.
Absolutely. Let's circle back to those remarkable women.
It's important to understand a little more about why their presence is so significant.
Starting with Tamar, her story in Genesis 38 is one of incredible determination and a bit of trickery.
Right. She takes matters into her own hands to ensure the family line continues. It's a story of perseverance.
Then you have Rahab in Joshua 2, who is a Canaanite prostitute who helps the Israelite spies.
Her faith and courage to align herself with God's people are truly striking.
Ruth, from the book of Ruth, is a Moabite widow who shows incredible loyalty to her mother-in-law Naomi.
And through her faithfulness, she becomes part of the lineage, highlighting God's inclusion of outsiders.
And finally, Bathsheba. Her story, linked with King David in 2 Samuel 11, is one of brokenness and ultimately redemption.
Even amidst the consequences of sin, God's plan continues. Their inclusion shows that God's grace is far-reaching.
Exactly. These brief glimpses into their lives reveal a God who uses all sorts of people to accomplish his purposes.
So as we were saying, after David, we move into the line of kings.
Verse 6b continues with Solomon, and then a string of other kings, some faithful, many not so much.
It's a mixed bag, showing the human element in this divine plan.
And this section culminates with the deportation to Babylon, a low point in Israel's history.
But even then, as we were about to say, that wasn't the end of the story.
No, verse 12 picks up after the exile, leading us through another...
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I have some questions for you. So, number one, what does the exile section teach us about the consequence of sin and God's faithfulness? Question number two, how do the forgotten names out of the exile point to God's sovereignty? Number three, is there a parallel between exile in the genealogy and spiritual exile in our lives today?
Those are really insightful questions. Let's definitely unpack the exile section a bit more.
Absolutely. The deportation to Babylon serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience.
Right. The kings and the people had turned away from God, and the exile was the result. It shows us that sin has real and significant consequences.
But within that period of exile, we also see God's unwavering faithfulness. He didn't abandon his people.
Exactly. The genealogy continues right through the exile, showing that God's plan was still in motion. Even in what looked like defeat, God was working towards redemption.
And that leads to your second question about the seemingly forgotten names after the exile and how they point to God's sovereignty.
It's fascinating, isn't it? After the big names of the kings, we get to a list of people who aren't particularly famous.
But their inclusion shows that God's plan doesn't depend on celebrity or worldly power. He uses ordinary people in every generation.
It highlights that God's sovereignty extends even to the seemingly obscure. He's working behind the scenes through the lives of everyday individuals.
And your third question about a parallel between the exile and the genealogy and spiritual exile in our lives today is so relevant.
I think many of us can relate to feeling spiritually distant from God at times, like we're in a kind of personal exile.
Just as the Israelites were separated from their homeland in the temple, we can feel separated from God through our choices or circumstances.
But the hope within this genealogy is that even in exile, God's faithfulness endures, and there's always a path back towards restoration.
The continuation of the lineage after the exile reminds us that God's grace is persistent. He doesn't give up on us.
So even in our own periods of spiritual difficulty, we can take comfort in knowing that God's sovereignty is at work and his faithfulness remains.
It's a powerful reminder that even the quiet seasons of our lives are part of a larger story of redemption.
Absolutely. And after this period of exile, as we were saying, verse 12 begins the final stretch of the genealogy.
We see the line from the deportation leading to Zerubbabel and eventually to Joseph.
These might seem like ordinary people living in a difficult time, yet they are part of this crucial lineage.
It highlights that God often works through the quiet, the unseen, the seemingly insignificant.
You don't have to be famous or powerful to be part of God's plan.
Which leads us to verse 16. Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ.
And here we arrive at the culmination of this long and winding genealogy.
Jesus, the Messiah, born into this lineage filled with both triumphs and failures, the expected and the unexpected.
So as we reflect on this genealogy as a whole, what are some of the key takeaways for us today?
Well, first and foremost, it screams of God's incredible...
Yeah.
Yeah, before your takeaway, I have three questions for you. First, why is Joseph not called the father of Jesus, but Mary's name specifically? Number two, how does this final verse point to both the humanity and divinity of Christ? And number three, what does this teach us about the intentionality of God's timing?
These are fantastic questions to wrap things up. Let's tackle these.
Yes, these really get to the heart of why this genealogy matters.
So first, why Mary specifically and not Joseph as the father?
What's fascinating here is that the genealogy traces Joseph's lineage, establishing Jesus' legal right to the throne of David.
But the phrase of whom Jesus was born points to the unique, miraculous nature of Jesus' conception through Mary.
It highlights the virgin birth, emphasizing Jesus' divine origin while still placing him within the historical lineage.
Exactly. It acknowledges Joseph's role as his legal earthly father, but underscores Mary's pivotal role in God's plan.
Now, your second question, how does this verse point to both Jesus' humanity and divinity?
Well, the fact that Jesus, born of a woman, Mary, firmly roots him in human history, in our shared experience.
He is fully human, part of this lineage, experiencing life as we do.
But the implication of the virgin birth, hinted at by the phrasing, also speaks to his divine nature, that he is more than just human.
He is God incarnate, both fully God and fully human. This verse beautifully encapsulates that mystery.
And finally, what does this teach us about the intentionality of God's timing?
This entire genealogy, spanning generations, demonstrates God's meticulous plan unfolding over centuries.
The fact that Jesus arrives at this specific point in history connected to these specific promises and people shows God's perfect timing.
It wasn't random. God was working all along, weaving this intricate tapestry of history leading to Jesus.
It truly underscores that God's timing is perfect, even when we can't see the full picture.
Absolutely. This genealogy is a testament to God's long-term faithfulness and his precise execution of his redemptive plan.
It really is the beauty of the gospel, as we were saying. God writes redemption into all our stories.
What he began with Abraham, he fulfilled in Christ and continues even now through each of us.
Thank you so much for joining us today to explore this genealogy.
Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
I have three last questions. Number one, if Jesus came from a line of imperfect people, what does that say about who he came to save? How does this genealogy reveal the mercy and patience of God? And number three, what is one name or story in this list that stands out to you personally and why?
Oh, these are fantastic final questions to ponder.
They really bring together the heart of this genealogy.
So first, if Jesus came from imperfect people,
What does that say about who he came to save?
well, it says he came to save all of us.
Exactly. This wasn't a lineage of perfect saints,
It was a line of real humans, flaws and all.
which means Jesus came for people just like us.
Imperfect, needing grace, making mistakes.
It underscores that his salvation isn't for some elite few.
It's for everyone, regardless of their background.
Your second question about mercy and patience.
How does this genealogy reveal those attributes of God?
Look at how many generations passed.
Centuries of human history filled with missteps.
Yet God's plan doesn't get derailed.
He remains faithful, patiently working towards his goal.
That's incredible mercy, isn't it?
Absolutely, despite the disobedience and brokenness.
God's love and his promises hold firm.
Finally, which name stands out personally and why?
For me, Ruth's story is always so moving.
Oh, tell us more.
Her loyalty and her outsider status.
Yet she becomes a key part of the lineage.
It speaks volumes about God's inclusive love.
That's a beautiful choice. For me, it's Tamar.
Oh, interesting. Why Tamar?
Her determination in a difficult situation.
She took initiative to keep the line going.
It shows a strength and resilience that's inspiring.
These stories really bring the genealogy to life.
They remind us that these weren't just names,
They were real people with real struggles.
and God's grace intersected with each of their lives.
It's a powerful testament to his enduring love.
Well, that brings us to the end of our time today.
Thank you for your wonderful questions and insights.
They truly enriched our conversation.
I hope you found this exploration meaningful.
Join us next time as we continue our journey.
Until then, may you be aware of God's grace in your own story.
Love so pure and bright, through the storms and through the valleys, he's beside us all the way. With his grace and his mercy, he's our refuge every day. Emmanuel.